All right.
All right, everyone, if we can turn our attention to the large screen there, we're about to begin our program. I just want to start off with a video just to introduce ourselves to you all. All right.
Black History and Racial Literacy Education is a professional development as well as a research center dedicated to improving how teachers teach about Black history and race in the classroom. So the problem has never been Black history per se, it is what kind of Black history is being taught in our schools, right? So if it's a Black history that focuses on Black heroes or Black people who have adopted some of the principles that we deem American, right, then that type of Black history is okay. But if it's a Black history that critiques the U.S. system, world systems, or if it talks about aspects of oppression, racism, anti-Blackness, sometimes those particular aspects of Black history are pushed aside in favor of the more heroic and progressive Black history.
When we first started doing the conference, it was always at high school. As it came here to UB, we did our first year here at UB in Louisville High School, but the last 2 years have been on campus. It has, every year we kind of, it can keep expanding, keep growing, we bring new people come in, a lot of same people kind of keep on going, coming back to it. In a lot of ways, just become a big family.
It has been unique to me since I've been participating, probably since 2019, is that it's a convergence of Black history educators and actual classroom teachers, K through 12. There's some different conversations that take place because we're talking about actual pedagogy and like practice and instruction that happens like maybe in an elementary school classroom with kindergartners or middle school classroom with 6th graders and high school classrooms. There's a lot of networking. People are sharing resources, people are sharing ideas, from their presentations, and a lot of the presentations are pretty unique. I've learned a lot, in multiple years that I've attended this conference, and also even being able to present, and also the feedback that I've received and the questions that the audience members have asked me.
Bringing together educators across the country who care about these issues, not across the country, across the world, and giving them the space and the opportunity to really reflect and also share with others. And that, number one, has been very helpful for me as a director of social studies education in Philadelphia by being able to offer this opportunity to educators there, but also the 8 Black historical consciousness principles. It shifts the way people even think about how they're planning, and like LaGarrett says, to teach Black history, not simply the subject, but through the Black lens.
So currently in elementary classrooms across the country, teachers are teaching Black history, mostly during Black History Month. Oftentimes in social studies, but there are also many states where banning the teaching of Black history and hard topics, specifically certain Black history texts or picture books in the classroom.
It's one of the really easiest ways, I think, for teachers, for students to access Black history is through literature and through stories, especially stories that are designed for children. Because a lot of times the information, it's so vast and there's so much that hasn't been traditionally included in the curriculum, and that's nationwide. And so having the opportunity now that we can use and that teachers can use to learn about the history and to actually have them, represented in ways that students, children can see themselves, it's like a win-win.
Over the years, the center has really cultivated this phenomenal Teach Black History Conference. That's how I was recruited to become a doctoral student and then a graduate fellow. It really encouraged me to incorporate Black history throughout every curriculum that I was using as a classroom teacher, and then also from everyone that's been impacted by the center. They've done amazing things like write books, and our director is internationally known for the center and all the amazing work he's done in Black history.
For me, I see the center in helping educate society, educate teachers to notice that, hey, history that is contentious is a proper history, one that helps us understanding that our histories are not the same, and that if we have a honest conversation about history, that things may get better. So if we have a solid history, right, one that explores everyone's perspectives, then as a society we can improve, because we can always say, what happened in history in this particular aspect? What can we predict, right? How can we improve on our outcomes based on the history that we did?
All right, so thank you for your attention. Hopefully you all learned a little bit about the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education. We are a professional development as well as a research center dedicated to improving how Black history is taught in K-12 education. And this is our third year here at the University of Buffalo. We came in January 2022, and now our biggest program is our Teaching Black History Conference. As you can see, where we bring hundreds of educators from around the world to learn the best practices connected with Black history in our classroom. So we have a wealth of other events that we use throughout the year, including our Black History Nerd Series on Saturday mornings, the second Saturday of every month. We're just a bunch of nerds that wake up on Saturday to learn about Black history and culture, right? We have one coming up this Saturday as well. But every second Saturday, we all get on Zoom and we learn about Black history and Black culture. We have our Western New York series, this is our third one. Our first one, we welcome the center and welcome everyone here. We tributed James Banks, who is the father of multicultural education, last year, and now we're doing the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education through a panel of people who lived through, as well as through the afterlife of Brown. There were some seminal moments that I can remember that got me really interested in Brown versus Board of Education. I think this is probably my third favorite history. My first is Haitian Revolution. Right? My second is the Harlem Renaissance, and my third is Brown versus Board of Education. One of the seminal moments in my life that made me really attached to Brown was whenever I talked to my elders, and whenever they spoke about their Black schools, they've always spoken about their Black schools in glowing ways, about their teachers in glowing ways, right? Like oh, this teacher did this, this teacher did that. I'm really, really connected to this teacher or my school, and they would talk about their friends, right? And they would talk about the education that they would receive from those particular schools. And when we learn about Brown, sometimes you get the impression that Black schools, predominantly Black schools, were not good schools, that they were inferior in education. My good friend Derek Aldrich from the University of Virginia has this oral history project called Teachers of the Movement. And one of his participants noted that when they got into these integrated schools, they looked around the class after a few minutes and said, these people are not smarter than we are. These teachers don't teach as good as our teachers in our schools. Another seminal moment was, second seminal moment, my dad used to say they used to fight all the time. So I always thought that history was pretty interesting. But 10 years ago, when I was at Clemson University, we had a similar event for the 60th anniversary. And we had a bunch of high school kids who were asking questions to our panelists. And one of the questions was simply this: how did you handle racism from your classmates? Now, if we know something about Brown, all deliberate speed, the majority of the schools did not really integrate until the 70s. So these people had to be in elementary school, right, at that time. And they clearly stated, out of the 6 people that we had, they clearly stated, we didn't experience racism from our classmates. We experienced racism from our teachers. And they understood that the majority of their teachers that they had in these integrated schools did not want to teach them. And that blew my mind at that moment, because I never heard that particular perspective. But when you think about it, when we trace the history of the achievement gap, which started in the 70s, this notion that black kids are left behind and don't want to learn and couldn't really learn in these particular schools and they fell behind, it makes a lot of sense. A good majority of these teachers did not want to teach our kids, and therefore they failed them. Not our kids failing themselves, because they were doing just perfectly fine in culturally relevant schools. So this brings us to this event here, celebrating 70 years of Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Buffalo is a very interesting space, right? And at one time, Buffalo was the prize of the United States in terms of their busing program, but they very little talk about Buffalo within the notions of integrated schools and how these students connected. So when we do history here at the center, what we do is we don't teach from this grand notion of curriculum. What we do is we get to the source of the people who lived through that history. Because if we talk to the people about those histories, then you'll find out that the majority of the histories we learned in the past does not connect with the actual history that people experienced. So many times you'll hear people say, and quote me and say, sometimes what's historically important to white people is not historically important to black people, because we have all these various different histories, but we don't learn the black perspective in our schools. So welcome to the Western New York event. And just in case you don't know who I am, I'm LaGarrett King, the Center Director. Sometimes I call myself the HNIC. That's just for people that know about Lean On Me. And I'm so happy to have everybody here to celebrate with us. So I want to start us off by introducing Jillian Hainsworth, who is a beautiful poet here in Buffalo. And I think, like, when I moved here, I think one of the first people that I came in contact with online was Jillian, right? So I've been a fan, like, secretly for at least 3 to 4 years. So I'm not stalking you or nothing like that. It's just the fact that, it's like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And I was at an event you were at, and you did. I said, oh, that's pretty cool. She's just really dope. So she's a spoken word artist, a poet laureate of Buffalo, New York, a community activist, and a recent recipient of the National Sports Envy Award in Dick Schaap Outstanding Writing category. Jillian was born and raised on the east side of Buffalo, where she developed a vision to use art and advocacy to help her community reimagine justice and work together to create a system where all people can thrive. Currently, Jillian travels the country performing poetry and speaking on various topics, including art for activism, the impact of storytelling, and the importance of honest and critical social and political conversations. In addition, Jillian oversees Buffalo Books, a nationally recognized program which aims to improve access to culturally relevant books for residents of the east side of Buffalo, with the hopes of helping to increase literacy rates amongst Black and brown communities. Ladies and gentlemen, Jillian Hainsworth.
Thank you. All right, can everybody hear me? Yeah. So I'm really happy to be here today. I'm really excited to be here. When I was approached to write a piece for this commemoration, it was really interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, I know a lot about Brown versus Board of Education. I can do that. And then I started getting emails with resources, and I realized that there was even more that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know how crucial Buffalo was to the fight for integration. I didn't know how important the role we played right here at home was. And now I do, all right? And that's the biggest thing that excited me about being able to do this today. Because now that I know, that means my nieces and nephews will know, And that means my siblings will know, and my cousins will know, because that's how we teach in our community, right? We tell stories, we sit around food, and we make sure that we are all in the know. So I'm really proud to be able to be now in the know when it comes to this particular fight. I'm proud of what I learned. I'm proud of what I come from. The commitment that comes from right here in Buffalo, the commitment to education, the commitment to community, the commitment to advancement of Black and brown people, of Black minds. I'm proud of the relentlessness and the good trouble that came out of this community. I am known for getting on the nerves of a lot of our local leaders. And that didn't come from nowhere. You know, that came from somebody. That was given to me. So to everyone in this room who is a part of the fight, who's educating on this fight, who make sure that we don't revert in our communities, thank you. Because that's where I get it from. I stand on your shoulders. I stand on your fight. My voice is an extension of yours. So I wrote a piece that I'm going to read for you. And they gave me like 10 minutes, so I can take my time. Y'all just got to sit here and listen.
Get down. Get down.
Like they say in church, take your time, baby. Okay. 70 years ago, it was resolved that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The scales tipped by the weight of racism were called to be balanced, and yet the people remained divided. A divide that would still exist with the same strength and rigor had some good people in the city of good neighbors not decided to make good trouble. Existing in a world built on a foundation of inequity and exclusion, they demanded fairness in education, knowing that would lead to the freedom to dream, to want for more than survival, to extend arms beyond the clouds, understanding that the worth of little Black and brown girls and boys exists within the stars. Taking in what has always been, these people said no more. No more complying with codes that don't breed fairness, acknowledging our history of better than. They ripped the blueprint out of the textbook, refusing to let it remain our reality. For they knew that even those living in a city divided by lines deserve to come together to understand our yesterday in order to shape our tomorrow. Sowing seeds of possibilities, they began unmantling systems constructed to oppress, and on their shoulders, we continue to tear it down, brick by brick. We continue to demand that our children learn so that they revolutionize, brick by brick. We continue to demand honesty and transparency as we observe our starting line, brick by brick. We rebuild every institution intended to inform. Audaciously questioning everything, keeping the stars in mind, we continue to reach for more, honoring those who began reaching way before we gave ourselves permission to reimagine. 70 years ago, advocates for the future of our communities stood in front of a judge and made a case for the advancement of our people. What we know as Brown versus Board of Education became the pavement of a new road leading to the promised land, flowing with both promise and opportunity. We journey on. For we have come a long way with more to come. May the 70-year voyage continue on until the destination is reached and the battle for equity is won. Thank you. And still we have so far to go, right? Keeping it local, Buffalo is so segregated. Just our city, you can cross Main Street and it's like you're in a different place. So it always begs the question, are we integrated if the city is still so segregated? In the recent election, some of us may still be feeling the tension and the weight of that moment. If you're an educator, if you are a freedom fighter, if you are a parent, if you are just someone who cares, then you know that might make us feel like we are taking steps backwards. But as an activist, because I'm an activist first, it's important that we remember that now is not the time for us to get tired. Now is not the time for us to lay down and die. We do not come from a people who lay down and die. We don't come from people who say, okay, that's just how it is. We come from a people who plan, and who strategize and organize, who make sure that our children and our siblings and our elders have what they need. So if you're in this room today, it's because you care. That's the starting line. If you're here today, it's because you understand that we have so far to go. So in the spirit of those who gave us something to celebrate, we have to remember that we also have something to fight for. We have to fight for our tomorrow. We have to make sure that we are giving our youth a reason to hope. So let's make sure that we don't make them feel like the fight is over, because it's not. It never is, even now. Before I leave, I wrote this really short poem yesterday. I don't know, I was just feeling like I needed to come out of the rut that I was in, because sometimes it can almost feel like a slap in the face to watch your community fight and to watch everybody around you go against what your community is fighting for. So I wrote this really short piece, and if it's okay, I'm just gonna read it. And I hope that you can find encouragement in this, as I did. As difficult as it may be to look to the light, when even the North Star has become a raging fire, and each phase of the moon becomes trepidatious and clandestine, still we fix our gaze. For each small blaze may be the spark required to burn down what we know and once knew. Each chapter of the night has the potential to bring the possibility of a new day. And though it be vexing to see yesterday's disappointments cloud tomorrow's reality, may we remember that it can never tarnish tomorrow's promise. Thank you.
All right, before we move on to the panelists introducing our moderator for today, I just want to step back a little bit, and I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Caroline Hurley, who is our events manager for the entire college. Wave, Caroline. All right. Also would like to thank Hannah Montgomery, who is our program manager at the center. So, you know, if you really enjoyed the food, if you enjoyed the program, if you enjoyed anything, tell them thank you, because they are a lifesaver. Also, this event was possible through a grant from the Baldy Center from the law school here at the University of Buffalo. If any representatives from the Baldy Center can just raise their hand or stand up. You know, it's confident, thank you for that. So allow me not to be too cheap on the food, so thank you very much, because, you know, everybody know, I'd be like, I don't know, we can have fried and baked. So I was able to get fried and baked chicken for the ones that don't eat fried chicken. So, and of course, all my center staff who do a wonderful job throughout. It's not easy, right? Because they're graduate students, and then they work for the center, and sometimes they think I'm crazy for all the stuff here. So if Daphne Bibbs would kind of raise her hand, she's coming up next. All right, we have Donovan James, raise your hand. All right. And Donovan's finishing up. Are you finishing up a book? I'm not going to volunteer you for anything. She's finishing up a book club on Saturday, so if you're interested in learning about pro-blackness and early childhood education, go holler at her towards the theme. And then we have our newest, Abigail Henry, here, who will close the program down. All right. And thank you for Will Green, who's the assistant dean over here for community engagement here at the University of Buffalo. All right, for hooking us up with all these cool people that you're going to hear their histories with. All right, did I miss anyone else? Anything? And of course, thank you all for coming here. All right.
everyone. As previously stated, my name is Daphne Bibbs, and I am one of the graduate fellows at the center. It is my pleasure to welcome our panelists tonight. Those panelists are Kathy Franklin Adams, Nanette Massey, Donette Ruffin, and Mario Workman. These amazing humans know firsthand the impact of Brown versus Board of Education in our community, each having experienced the integration of the Buffalo public school system. We are so fortunate to have these panelists here to share their personal school experiences and to discuss the changes that have been made in this city, as well as the further work that needs to be done. Now I'm going to introduce to you all our moderator for the evening. Sorry, give me 1 second. Dr. Anthony White II is a native of Buffalo, New York, and a social studies teacher in the Buffalo Public Schools District. A lifelong resident of Buffalo, Dr. White was educated in BPS's Frederick Law Olmsted Gifted and Talented Magnet School program. From there, he matriculated from SUNY at Buffalo with a bachelor's degree in history and African American studies, a master's degree in social studies education, and then a doctorate in curriculum instruction and the science of learning. As migrants during the historic Great Migration, Dr. White's grandparents relocated to Buffalo, New York from the Deep South, settling in the historically Black Hamlin Park District and the Fruit Belt neighborhood, where his parents will later serve as members of the first cohort of BPS students to participate in the district's desegregation initiatives. Lastly, I will briefly introduce to you all our discussant for the panelists, and who will also do a little Q&A. That is none other than Dr. Marcus Watson, an associate professor at Buffalo State. He will offer final thoughts at the conclusion of this panel discussion. Please welcome our panelists to the floor, as well as our moderator.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right. Again, good evening. Thank you all for coming. I just want to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to get started as our panelists are joining us. I am Dr. Anthony White. I will be the moderator for this evening. I would just like to take a moment to say thank you very much to Dr. Director King for allowing me to serve in this capacity, and to just say publicly, and I had a chance to share this with the panelists, I am humbled and honored to serve in this capacity. I was born and raised in Buffalo, educated in the Buffalo Public Schools, and now I'm a teacher in the Buffalo Public School District. So their work is not... So their efforts are not lost on me, and it's humbling to be in this capacity. I'm going to read our panelists' bios, and then I will tell you about some of our housekeeping for the discussion. Okay. First is Ms. Donette Ruffin. She was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. She attended Buffalo Public Schools and graduated from East High School in 1964. She graduated from Buffalo State College, earning a bachelor's and master's degree in elementary education. Mrs. Ruffin was also a recipient of New York State certification in administration and supervision. She has been a classroom teacher in various Buffalo public schools, a program coordinator and elementary supervisor prior to her appointment as principal of Community School Number 53. During her 15-year tenure as principal, Mrs. Ruffin received numerous accolades and awards. A special recognition was the Black Achievers Award. After retirement, Mrs. Ruffin served as a consultant in the Understanding Poverty program and conducted workshops throughout the area teaching the impact of poverty as it relates to student learning. She also had the opportunity to serve as an adjunct professor at the University of Buffalo, working with students who expressed an interest in teaching in urban areas. Mrs. Ruffin continues to reside in Buffalo and attends Durham Memorial AME Zion Church, where she serves as a deaconess. Please give a round of applause to Mrs. Ruffin. This next bio is written in the panelists' own words, and that is how I'm going to read them. Kathleen, Kathy, Vivian, Albert, Franklin, Adams. Why all the names? I used all of my names because each name represents a period in my life that helped shape me into the person I am today. I am paying homage to each. I was born in Buffalo, New York, and educated within the Buffalo public school system from PK to 12th grade, and am a 1966 graduate of East High School. I did my own personal bid for integration by attending a small Methodist college, now Mount Union University in Alliance, Ohio. After graduation, I returned home and became an employee of the Buffalo Public Schools from 1971 as a teacher to 1987 as a Quality Integration Education Coordinator, 1989 Assistant Principal, 1992 to 2005 Elementary Principal with a Master's of Science and Administrative Certification from Buffalo State College. Though officially retiring in 2005, I am still active in the system as an administrative substitute and consultant for an area charter school. I am a wife, mother of 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and a great-grandson. I am active in my church, Bethel AME, my block club, and at Shays Performing Arts Center as a volunteer. Each one of us can make a difference. Together, we make change. Whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. Please give our second panelist a round of applause. Our third bio is nice and to the point. Mr. Mario Workman is a Buffalo native, born in 1973, a proud graduate of Bennett High School, class of 1991, a married father of 4, currently employed as an operator in a local manufacturing company. Please give Mr. Workman a round of applause. And last but not least, Nanette D. Massey. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Okay. Nanette D. Massey is a workshop facilitator and freelance writer living in Buffalo. Massey has writing credits in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, USA Today, the Buffalo News, the Challenger, Buffalo Spree Magazine, and BlackNewsAndViews.com. A product of the Buffalo Public School System, Massey was in the very first 5th grade class riding the bus from East Buffalo to City Honors as a result of the 1976 court case Arthur v. Nyquist that ordered the desegregation of Buffalo schools and brought about the creation of the city's magnet schools. Massey conducts a workshop called Moving Beyond White Fragility using Dr. Robin DiAngelo's best-selling book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Race. Her work caught the attention of the author, and DiAngelo came to Buffalo to co-lead an all-day forum with Nanette in 2022 at Canisius College to over 350 grateful attendees. Massey is working on her first book, a primer on how to navigate conversations about race with confidence, humor, and humility from nothing but an authentic place of desiring to do one's part for a better world. Please give our final panelists a round. Okay, for our audience and our panelists, we have 4 and 1 possible questions. I've done the math, and that means each of you have about 3 minutes per question. I will softly signal you when we are getting to the 1 minute mark. Okay. All right, here we are. Question number 1, quite open. Would you please briefly share with us your experience of working towards integration in the Buffalo Public School District? In addition, if there is a special moment or story that you think you would really love to share, then please share that as well. I'm going to start this way.
All right. Hi, everybody. Nana DiMassi. Like I said, mine was, we moved a lot when I was a kid, so I was going to a different school just about every year anyway. So in 4th grade, they told me, you get on that bus, you go to that school. I was living on the east side, and I went to 81 on Tacoma in Delaware. All I knew was it was a new bus, new school. Yeah, there happened to be some white people. And I really didn't understand. And then the next year, I started 5th grade at what was the brand spanking new City Honors. It was on the corner of Delavan and Main. And I really had no idea that I was in the middle of this QIE thing, that there had been a court case and that this was a big deal. I really had no idea. I just went to school, and our gangs were delineated by which Charlie's Angel was your favorite. It wasn't white, black, anything. And like I said, mine was the first 5th grade class that went all the way from. What did I do? Did I do that? Did I do that? Mine was the first class that started in 5th grade and went all the way through to 12th grade. And in the middle of 9th grade, my mother transferred me to Bennett High School. She thought that going to school with that many white people was making me uppity. And so that was kind of what happened with me. So you and I both ended up Bennett Tigers.
Yes.
Yeah, but my heart belongs to the Centaurs, City Honors Centaurs. And yeah, okay.
As a child, growing up, you didn't realize you were in a segregated community. I went to my neighborhood school all the time, from pre-K up through East High School. I was able to walk, so I never knew what the experience was like getting on a bus, having to go somewhere else. So I would technically say an experience with integration was as a teacher at School 37. We were asked if we wanted to transfer to a peripheral school, which meant on the edge of the city, where there were more white students and more white teachers. Since it was voluntary, we were asked voluntarily at the time. I said no, because I had a great mentor that looked like me and felt I needed to be mentored more before I stretched out somewhere else. But as the powers would have it, I was at School 60, and it was on the other side of town. I used to take some of my students because they were also being removed from their environment. So as I passed by on my way to 60, I picked them up, and we would all go together. So my experience is that as staff, we were integrated right along with the students. We were told that School 37, the percentage of black teachers was too high, and they wanted to spread us around. On the positive side, I think our kids needed to have us there. If they were being moved into an environment outside their community, having someone there that looked like them was a help to them.
Good evening. My experiences are similar to Kathy. I didn't get involved with the field integration, until I was a teacher. The same thing happened with me. We were asked if we wanted to volunteer. At that time, I was working at School 39 on High Street, and I was extremely happy there, and I did not want to go. And I told everybody I didn't want to go, and people working, my fellow colleagues were encouraging me to become a BTF representative. I didn't want to do that either. The thing is, what they did not tell me is that if you don't become a BTF representative, they're gonna move you anyway. So I didn't become a BTF representative, and I was one of the people that got moved. I was not happy. In fact, I remember going to the Board of Education meeting that was held in the Common Council chambers, and I spoke about moving minority teachers out of minority schools. I probably shouldn't have done that because I ended up getting moved, but the thing that I remember about that was that as I finished speaking, and I really don't remember what I said, I was walking back to standing in the back. If you've been to the Common Council chambers, you know they had that railing in the back. And I stood back there, and as I was walking past, I heard some lady say, "Oh, she speaks so well." And that really bothered me. I thought, well, what did they think I was going to do? I'm a teacher, I'm working, I'm well-educated, why shouldn't I speak well? Anyway, they moved me, and I ended up at School 44 on Clinton. And at that time, I only had 2 minority students in my classroom. I had a little girl, and she was Puerto Rican, and a little black boy, who really kept things interesting during my time in that building. But I was treated very well at 44. I liked the principal, and he liked me. And one of the things that I found out that I didn't know before was that their materials, their reading materials and their math materials were substandard. They were nowhere near as good as the ones that I had at School 39, in an all-black school in a poor area.
That was interesting hearing all 3 of your stories, because I probably had said in my head what I thought you were going to say, and it wasn't what I thought you were going to say. I had an abrupt change in my life at like 8 years old. My life was perfect as I thought. In my 8 years, 9-year-old kid, I was mom and dad at home. I had an older sister, and we would come outside to go to school, walk to school. School was right around the corner. So I would try to beat my sister to school. She would have to walk to the corner and then around. I would come out of the side door, go around the garage, hop the back gate, come out on the garage on the next street, cut through their parking lot, their driveway, cross the street, and I would be at school in 60 seconds. So that was in 2nd grade. After 2nd grade, that summer, my mom said we had to get bused to Lovejoy. So I was living on Norfolk, right around the corner from Olympic, right off Kennedy. All my friends, every child on the street, unless they went to a Catholic school, went to that school. So all my buddies, we all went to the same school. So going into 3rd grade, I had to get up an hour and a half earlier, get on the bus, drive through the east side and pick up all the other kids, go all the way down to a neighborhood that I had never been to before. So it wasn't like, someone said earlier, I was listening, but it wasn't the students who had issues with us. Riding the bus, it was the parents. It'd be the parents. You look out the windows, you can see the faces, and although we didn't have to be escorted to school by police officers, it wasn't that bad. But as a 8, 9, 10-year-old going from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, being called the N-word by adults, it was the beginning of, I guess, something like pulling the veil back on reality and you being able to see who people really are. And it wasn't the naive world that I thought we were living in as a 7 or 8-year-old. So, that was it.
Thank you. Second question. In a 2003 interview, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter Nicole Hannah-Jones noted that some of the negative differences in school achievement between black and white students was cut in half during the high point of school desegregation. Others began, as Dr. King mentioned. She credited the improvement to the fact that school resources, such as funding and highly trained and experienced teachers, were shared equally among all students, and therefore, Black students were given a more equal educational opportunity. Question number 2. Based on your personal experience, were there any positive differences that you experienced or became aware of when you attended the school you integrated as compared to the school that you had to leave?
Like I said, first time I went to an integrated school was 4th grade, and I was still very young developmentally, and I hadn't even noticed, before that I hadn't even noticed that the schools that I went to were all Black. It was just school. When I began going to integrated schools, like I said, I really didn't understand that this was a big deal. It was just another school for me. I did well in early grades, and I did just as well in later grades. So I couldn't really, I didn't really have a comparison. I'm torn now because I see what integrated education did. I know for me, going to school, in my home, I used to hear my mother say all the time, Black get back, brown stick around, white you're all right. So my mother, who was born in the 40s, had really internalized the stratification message and her place in it. Going to school with white kids, I didn't get that message. I was learning that they didn't have anything I couldn't have. I couldn't go anywhere that they could go. And like I said, in my home, that was very threatening. It was very threatening. It caused a rift between me and my mother that never really healed. And I'm torn because for as much as integrated schooling did for me, I think that there's something to be said for Mario's experience where he could just hop over a fence in a garage and be at school. 3rd grade, I walked to school 74. 3rd grade, I'm like, what, 7 years old? I was able to walk to school by myself, you know, and my sister. And I remember as I got on the bus and I drove by my 3rd grade school, I remember thinking, wow, so what about these guys? And I think, like I said, for as much as integrated education did for me, I think that there's a lot to be said for schools where kids can just walk to school, where parents who don't have cars can walk to school to meet teachers on teacher education, parent-teacher night. Parent can walk to school, teacher can call, your child is acting up, and mother can walk to school and straighten it out right then and there. There's something to be said for that. And maybe instead of putting these kids on buses in order to get a good education, we need to look at the underperforming schools in Black neighborhoods and not think so much in terms of dividing the pie equally. Certain schools need more resources, you know, and certain schools are doing just okay, and they would be okay with less. City ours would be all right without that big ass pool. They gonna be all right. You know, 74 could use a bigger library, you know, and each class, I volunteer. I'm in my 3rd year volunteering with a 2nd grade teacher. I just show up, and anytime I feel like it, she's glad to have me. I think every class in there needs a volunteer or teacher assistant, because you've got a teacher who is trying to teach people, and she's managing behavioral problems. And when her back is turned, she's got a manager. If each of these schools, each of these classes had something like that, and maybe City Honors doesn't need that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we need to look at redistribution of resources. I think that's what's needed. And like I said, there's something to be said for neighborhood schools, neighborhood schooling. Maybe integration is, it's not the only, it's not the be all end all.
An example of what you said about the resources. I remember at 37 when we started, when it was state testing, in the fall, you gave the test all in one day, just to get it over with, knowing that if your scores were low, you would get money, which meant resources for staff, for materials, for experiences. When I was at Campus West, which was like a country club on the college campus, I mean, you had all the amenities with the college. If something happened, you call and, the campus security would show up. If you needed anything, it was there. Parents came. They could, go up and see their child behind one-way glass. So you didn't have to say your kid is doing A, B, and C. They could come and see it. When we were studying rainforest, we took 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and flew to St. Croix for a week. So the monies that other schools were getting to maintain, it was almost like play money for a school that already had those resources. So when you mentioned about distribution of wealth, it does, it does make a difference. When you said about what your mother said, my mother said, if you were in the room with them, whether the teacher liked you or not, in order to teach them, they had to teach you as well. So it was still up to us to be able to get what was being put out. But you could tell there were differences. Teachers may have been afraid of the students, so they didn't either give them the discipline that they needed because they were afraid and let them do whatever, or they would just try to ignore them. The suspension rates went up because something another kid might do, you might overlook it, but you would do the same thing, you were getting suspended. So that was something we did really have to look at, and we noticed once integration started.
Well, as a child, I didn't know anything about integration because I went to an all-black school from the time I was in pre-primer until I got to East High School. There were no majority children at School 75 when I was there. There were no, I don't remember any at Clinton, well, it was School 87 then, but Clinton Junior High, I don't remember any being there. When I got to East, there were probably not as many as there had been years past, but when I was there, there were some white kids. I remember looking through the yearbook recently, and I said, oh yeah, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so. We got along fine. We got along fine. I was blessed to have very, very good teachers, excellent teachers. I didn't have many black teachers. I had a black teacher when I went to school, 75, Mrs. Michaels, she was my music teacher. And I think I had Miss Nash, and she was in 6th grade, but I don't remember having any problems with any teacher except one. And that was an unfortunate situation that my mother had to come to school because she punched me in my back. And my mother had to come to school and talk to. His name was Mr. It's amazing how I can remember all this now. Mr. Lord was the principal. And I know he asked her, do you want to talk to the teacher? My mother says, no, I do not want to talk to the teacher. I want you to talk to the teacher. And tell her that she had better not do that again. And I didn't have any more trouble, but she didn't like me, she really didn't care for me. She didn't like, and I say this now because I think this is what happened to some of our black children that went into integrated schools years ago. And she didn't like me because she said I read too fast, and I was always asking questions, and I'd always raise my hand, put your hand. She would never call on me. She'd call on everybody else, even though they didn't know the answer. And she never called on me. And I think that's what some of our children experienced when they went into integrated situations. I didn't get a taste of that until I became a program coordinator, because when I got transferred to School 44, and that was a predominantly white school. Everybody treated me very nice. They went out of their way to be nice to me. I do remember parent night. My parents were lined up down the hall, and I remember having a long discussions because where I came from at School 39, Dr. Dixon insisted that you put the reading level on the report card of the children. Well, I go to School 44, and I didn't know any better, so I put the reading level on the report card. It was not on 3rd grade level, and that's the grade that I was teaching. Parents had up there. They're only on 2nd grade level. I said, well, that's the way they came to me. But by the time they leave here, they'll be on level. But the thing is, you find the difference when you go to other schools as a teacher. And what I found that even though we were in the poor area, even though we were in the supposedly poor sections of school, depending upon what school you were assigned to, you found out that many times our kids were doing a heck of a lot better than some of these other kids were doing. And that's one of the reasons I think they wanted to send some black teachers into some of these white schools, because we were really, really good teachers. And they wanted to, in fact, when I became a teacher, and my girlfriend was laughing about the other day, I remember telling the elementary, I guess she was the director at that time, or assistant superintendent, that I wanted to teach black kids. And she said, well, you know, white children need good teachers too. And I told her, in fact, that I didn't go to college to teach white kids. I went to college to teach black kids. I wanted to teach in a black school. That's all the school I'd been to. So I wanted to teach black kids. I fortunately was able to do that because, you know, like anything else, if you know somebody. I went to school with a girl that whose father knew somebody on the school board, and I wrote him a letter. And I got assigned to School 39. So as far as good experiences are concerned, I didn't really get a bad experience, so I really noticed it until I got transferred. I became program coordinator, and then I began to see things that I didn't see as a classroom teacher. You know, when you're a classroom teacher, you're in your own classroom, you're dealing with your own kids, and a lot of times you don't see other things, and especially if you stay out the faculty room. But anyway, I got to School 70 on Indian Park Academy down off of Seneca. And I noticed that there were a lot of black kids bused into School 70. Every time a little child was in the office, a little black boy, especially the little black boys were in the office, there was a little white kid sitting next to him with a note. And what the teachers did at School 70 was every time a black child had to be sent to the office, a white child had to take him by the hand, escort him to the office, note for the principal. That's the first time I had ever seen it. I was also told by the principal that he did not want me interfering in anything in the school. I was to work with the teachers and the teachers alone. I didn't do cafeteria duty. Every program coordinator I ever knew had cafeteria duty, not me. He didn't want me in the cafeteria interacting with the kids. And I used to stand at the window, because you could look down into the cafeteria and watch the kids at lunchtime. And I saw some things that were not very nice going on with children that were bussed in. And I still remember that, and I say that now because I think some of those teachers were doing some things that they shouldn't have been doing. And there were only maybe 2 black teachers in the building at that time. And they would talk in the faculty room among themselves about the things that were happening to some of the kids. So those were my good and bad experiences about integration.
Well, first before I answer the question, Ms. Danette, my son is a 7th grade student at City Honors, and that is a big ass pool. But I think the intent was to have, you know, students integrated. I think the intent was supposed to be positive and uplifting, but across the board, I don't think they considered, across the board, I didn't grow up in a poor neighborhood. We weren't rich, we weren't wealthy, but we weren't poor. So when I was bused to this other neighborhood, those kids were worse off than we were. You know, we're coming to school with Jordans on, and we're coming to school and, you know, Michael Jackson beaded jackets, and these kids barely make it. So I think the intent was supposed to be positive, but I don't have a lot of positives to draw back from it, except for the fact that I do have friends that I met back then in the 80s that I'm still friends with now. White kids, Asian kids, Hispanic kids. Outside of it, I guess I can look back and say some of my experiences matured, you know, made me more mature. Again, like I said before, it opened my eyes up to the world. When I've only heard stories of my grandparents and my parents tell me about, like my grandfather tell me about how he would have to cross the street. He grew up in Macon, Georgia. He would have to cross the street if a white person was coming. I could never imagine anything like that. And then my parents growing up in the 50s and 60s, where my father went to East High School, my mother went to, it wasn't City Honors at the time, it was Fosdick Maston or something. She went there. And the stories that they would tell, I couldn't imagine. So then now, late 70s, early 80s, I'm just thrown into it. It wasn't something I would wish on my children to have to go through at that age, but I went through it. I think it made me a better person. I think I was able to look at the world from a sobering perspective, opposed to, you know, just being a kid who's just oblivious to everything. So I guess that would be my only positive out of it. School was easy for me, and I'm not saying I'm a genius, I'm not. But school, it didn't challenge me, right? So going from one school to another, it didn't challenge me. I found myself getting into a lot of trouble because I was bored half the time. So again, they didn't push me to strive for anything greater than just passing. And I know that comes from home as well, not just the school, but that comes from home. But it just wasn't, I know I may sound like, I may sound like it was a really terrible thing. It wasn't. It just wasn't as positive as I think they thought it was going to be.
I'm gonna try this microphone again.
I hope we're keeping you awake out there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to try this microphone again. Thank you very much for your responses. I just wanted to check in on the time. We have about 10 minutes left, and there are 2 questions that I do want us to try to get to. Before I mention this next question, I just want to take a moment, and I haven't said much as a moderator, but as a Black history teacher, I do just want to underscore these narratives of Black autonomous thriving. I think that's a really important point that came through for all of these. So this leads into the next question. During the past 20 years, Black educational researchers have drawn attention to the negative consequences of school desegregation for Black students and their communities. For example, researchers have noted that it was often Black children who were called upon to do the work of integration, which took them from nurturing, academically enriching Black school environments and placed them into ones which were sometimes hostile, and that the closure of predominantly Black schools resulted in the massive loss of Black school principals, who were also political leaders in their communities, and the loss of school buildings themselves, which had been points of community pride and political organization, like the Black church. Question number 3, and some of you have spoken to this already. Based on your personal experience, were there any negative effects that you experienced or became aware of as a result of integrating into a school and leaving the one you had left?
For me personally, I feel like the entire experience of school integration was very positive. I don't have a bunch of stories to tell you about people throwing rocks at me. Like I said, I went to City Honors. We were all it was a hippie school. when I went there. It wasn't like International Macaulay or we were all hideous. You know, we were all love, peace, and love, peace, and hickories. And I will say though that I grew, when I was coming up, I was learning, and I think that the success of school integration allowed this narrative to continue, that all those terrible things that we heard about with Mario's grandfather having to cross the street and things like that, that happened a long time ago. You know, when I was learning history in the 70s, you know, it really didn't occur to me that 50 or 60 something wasn't really that long ago. I really didn't put it together. I was 2 years old when Martin Luther King was shot. That was current events for a lot of people. It wasn't history. I was learning it like it was history. So I grew up with this narrative that we all, well, all white people have in America, that racism was this thing that happened a long time ago. Martin Luther King died on the cross for our sins, and everything's equal now. So the idea of systemic racism, I had to be taught that as an adult too. I remember I was 18 and I was waiting for a guy to show me an apartment on Main Street near Amherst. He was supposed to be there at 4:30. Somewhere around 4:30, a car pulled up to the curb and then kept going. And I sat there and waited for another 20 minutes. It was years before I put together that was the landlord. He was white, he saw it was black, and he pulled off. I had heard that that stuff doesn't happen anymore. I was learning that stuff doesn't happen anymore. So I sat there and I waited for another 20 minutes. I had no clue. The first time I went to a white girlfriend's house to stay overnight, we went to the pool. We went to the public pool. We were sitting there talking, and we were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden there was a lot of phlegm on my leg. I had learned that white people spitting on black people out in public with impunity was something that happened a long time ago. That doesn't happen now. So I, honest to God, had nowhere in my brain that could figure out why there was a lot of phlegm on my leg. I mean, I really just couldn't understand it. Again, it was years later I put it together. I think I might have been the only black person there, I don't know. It was years later that I put together that someone spit on me because I was black. Because I was learning that doesn't happen anymore, you know. So one of the negative effects of integration was that it allowed us this patina of, you know, we're fixed, everything's done now, everything's equal. And then, you know, Buffalo said, okay, we're fixed, we don't have to do this anymore, stop busing, the schools went back. Just like with the 1964 Voting Act. The Supreme Court said, okay, we're fixed, everything's equal now, got rid of the act. First thing they did was, you know, started all these efforts for, started all these voter suppression efforts. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I hope I'm making sense. It's so hard when you have 3 minutes and you're trying to fit it all in. You look back later and you go, oh my God, what did I say? I hope I made a point that was worthwhile.
Preparing for this, I wanted to look back into Buffalo's history for integration, and I found an article from a professor at UB that said early as 1830s, Buffalo was involved in free education for black students, and they started district schools in Buffalo like 1840. And parents petitioned, black parents petitioned for a school in their area so that their children would be able to go to school free as well. And the school that they were given, the building was appalling, the materials were subpar, and the teachers that taught in those district schools were paid a lot less. And then around in 1867, there was a barber that petitioned the Common Council, the school board, that they should be able to go to the schools in their neighborhood, because that school also did not provide public transportation. So the Common Council agreed, so on September 1st, black parents started sending their kids to the district schools. By September 16th, there was a school committee for the Common Council, and they petitioned this Common Council that they should rescind the petition. So between, I think, September 24th and October 8th, all the black students were physically removed from these district schools. And Ms. Barber sued the superintendent because the superintendent was the one that was physically removing the students. So he sued the superintendent for assault and battery because you're physically removing my child from the building. He lost the suit, but as a result of the pressure from the community, and there were always white supporters that supported integration. Because of the pressure from them, the Common Council agreed. So in 1872, almost 100 years prior to what we were dealing with, Buffalo was integrated quietly. So it's like, you know, now we're coming 100 years later, and now even further than that, trying to get a quality education where we live.
I really didn't have a problem with this whole idea of thinking that you're not as good, or you're not as educated, or you didn't get the resources that someone else got. Basically, until I really began working, I had a pretty successful schooling. I went to neighborhood schools. I had good teachers because I thought they were good. They seemed to be good. Some of them were parents' teachers. And I enjoyed school. I really liked school. That's why I wanted to become a teacher, because I liked school so well. And I did well in school. Now, I think, as my girlfriend used to tell me, you did well in school because you got good grades. All of us weren't as smart as you were, so we didn't do so well. But the thing is, I studied. I went home and I had the support of my parents. What I began to realize is that when I got out of school, when I started going to Buff State, I was the only black person in the class. And I was surprised by that. I looked around and said, I'm the only one in here. You know, where the rest of them? They weren't there. I didn't see a lot of black kids come into Buff State until the SEED program that Art Thief started. And I was a senior by then. And I came back after student teaching. There were so many black people on campus. I didn't know what had happened. I said, oh my God, look at all these people, you know. But I did learn, you know, about things after I became a teacher. And I began to see the differences. It was amazing to me that every single year the BTF said, we have 300 black teachers. That went on for years. We mean we're never going to have any more than 300 black teachers in all the schools in the city of Buffalo, because we weren't hiring them. And people have said they went down to Board of Education, they tried to apply, and they couldn't get hired. One of my very good girlfriends had to end up going to Tonawanda because she could not get a job. She was an English teacher. Buffalo would not hire her. So I find that with this whole idea about integrating the schools, the one story that I just found out recently in talking to my brother was that he said he lived in Hamlin Park area, he lived around Moody. When he was supposed to go to Woodlawn Junior High. And when he got to 7th grade, he was part of the QIE program or the DSEC program or whatever they wanted to call it back then. They sent him to Southside. He said he had to take 3 buses. I had no idea. I was teaching at the time, I probably was just paying attention. He told me, he said I had to take 3 buses and I could not stay after school for any activities, because if you didn't get on that bus to get home, you were going to be in serious trouble with the kids in the neighborhood. So as far as integration is concerned, it may have worked for some people, but it certainly didn't work for others.
That's bone chilling, because you mentioned Southside. I was at 43 in Lovejoy, which wasn't too far away from it. And in 7th grade, did anybody here go to school 43 at all? Okay. Did they still have the gymnastics team when you were there?
A bit earlier than you.
Oh, okay. You look younger with the, okay. I got the white hair. So, I was a 7th, 8th grade, tall, skinny, goofy kid with braces and glasses. And I just learned how to play basketball, but I was on the gymnastics team, which meant when they had the gymnastics show, I had to catch the bus, the Bailey bus, back down to Lovejoy, and then walk from Lovejoy to Benzinger, which is about 5 blocks, maybe. So twice a year for the gymnastics show, I would have to catch the bus and walk down. And each time, when I crossed, well, one time, I was passing Wilson Farms, which is, I think, was on the corner of Benzinger and, not Benzinger, Gold and Lovejoy. It's still there. Okay. And the lady came out and said something, I don't know exactly what she said, but I recognized the N-word because I knew what it was. She said it. So then I just put a little pep in your step and hurry up and get to school, because you know, if you say anything back or you hang around too much longer, it's going to be a problem. Second year was they told us that they were going to build a pool across from the school where the fire department was. I think that pool is still there, so they had us all sign up, told us we could come. It's a community pool. I signed up for it and tried to go to the pool one summer. And again, I wasn't called the N-word, but the way they look at you, the way they make you feel, being in the 7th and 8th grade, it gives you lifelong anxiety. I've been down in that area. There was a restaurant down there that a friend sent me to right after the pandemic, and I went down there. Food was great, food was wonderful, but all those flashbacks of those early years going down there just never changed. That was, lifelong negativity. I don't have hard feelings for people, but it's a lifelong negative scar, I guess.
We are going to move on to the next portion, which is Q&A. So it is my honor to introduce our discussant for the evening. Dr. Marcus Watson is an associate professor and coordinator of Africana Studies at Buffalo State University, with 14 years of research and teaching experience focused on illuminating life from Black people's points of view. Specializing in the areas of African culture and psychology, Dr. Watson uses that experience to bring to the attention of students and scholars the overlooked contributions of Black people to humanity and civilization. At Buffalo State, he offers a wide range of courses that delve deeply into what the world looks and feels like from African perspectives. Examples of courses include Introduction to Africana Studies, Blacks in Buffalo, a course on international development called, quote, Saving Africa, and a course on Black psychology called Why Africa Matters. Including the 9 years he taught and earned tenure at the University of Wyoming, Dr. Watson has published over a dozen refereed articles, has delivered more than 40 professional presentations, and has secured a book contract with Universal Right Publications for his work on his original African psychology theory of, quote, half connecting. Please welcome our discussant.
Wherever you feel comfortable.
Test.
Thank you very much.
Congrats on the book contract.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. How are we doing? I don't know what I'm going to say, really. I mean, I do kind of, but I have looked at some materials that were given to me ahead of time and developed some ideas there. But I wanted to be open to what I was going to hear. And so that's the part where we'll see how that comes around. But thank you very much for sharing your personal experiences regarding integration in Buffalo. I learned a lot. oppressed. And here are some things that I would like to share. Some of it's kind of history, some of it is personal in terms of Buffalo. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So one thing I find interesting, and maybe you will too, about Brown versus Board, is that it involved 5 different cases. You're aware of that, probably, right? It was 5 cases rolled into one, and they all became called yes, Brown versus Board. But when you look at the individual cases, they were in different parts of the country: South Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and some other places. For the most part, the people in these black communities around the country, what they actually wanted was equal resources, which was mentioned here. And also, in several of the cases, it was the NAACP that decided to sort of convert the cases from trying to get equal resources to trying to dismantle segregation. I find that fascinating because the NAACP, has done a lot for us. It's probably the most well-known civil rights organization. But it was integrationist. It was integrationist. And that's not necessarily what all the people in the cases were asking for. Right? They were really asking for equal resources. Now, brilliant ancestor heroes like Charles Hamilton Houston, right, who was a special kind of assistant for the NAACP. I mean, he had the brilliant idea of trying to bring down segregation by making it too expensive, right, for the government to keep it going, right? So he injected, in large part it was him who injected that idea, and therefore the NAACP, of saying, let's, if we ask for equal resources, because that's what, separate but equal, right? Plessy versus Ferguson, it's supposed to be separate but equal. If we demand, a law school for black folks, it might have just been like for one black school, that has all the same facilities as the white law school in a certain place, we're gonna make, the government have to make a hard choice. Do they spend all that money to make, equal resources, or do they integrate? Okay. So his agenda was always integrate. But I find it interesting that wasn't necessarily, what in all of those 5 cases, there were about 2 where people from those communities, they sought out the NAACP. But in about 3 cases, the NAACP kind of said, hey, that's a case we can use to try to take down segregation. So what that means to me, when I think about it, is in a lot of these communities, people were okay. I mean, they weren't okay with segregation, the negative effects of it, but they were okay being a black nation. That wasn't really, what the concern was for a lot of these nations, for a lot of these communities. They were okay being a black nation, not necessarily an American, nation. So I mean, integration, from that perspective, in a sense, was the start of Americanizing black folks, right? Trying to say, look, we're going to bring you in, and of course it meant really into white, in this case, schools, white institutions. We're gonna bring you in now, right? We're going to bring you in now, and one question is, what are the consequences of that? A lot of you spoke, to personal experiences with that. Before we get, more down to kind of personal experiences, I think it's important to note that one of the consequences it seems, is a change in consciousness from being more internationally minded, right? Because I'm in my Black nation. That's what I know it is, you know. So when I do connect, I'm connecting to Black folks, African folks everywhere in the world. When I do think of that, this was a time of great international affairs, right? It's following shortly after World War II. 1951, just 3 years before Brown versus Board, we have the We Charge Genocide, right? Document. That's William Patterson, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois, who write it and bring it to the United Nations, accusing the US government of genocide against Black people, right? That pamphlet circulated. They brought it to the UN, and for it, they were disciplined severely in terms of passports being confiscated. William Patterson was stuck in Europe because he brought it to the French United Nations office, and they took his passport. He never could get back, or at least for a while. So Brown versus Board was a kind of Faustian bargain. It's kind of a Faustian bargain, meaning when a person or a group of people decides to relinquish some of their most cherished principles, if they can gain something material. So the Faustian bargain was from the US government: if you stop embarrassing us internationally with things like We Charge Genocide, or we're trying to win the Cold War, right? And you're feeding the Soviets, ammunition against us. If you stop doing that, we'll give you desegregation. So Brown versus Board was more of a conservative move than it's often led on. We kind of backed into it, and you had a change of leadership because of that. You go from Du Bois and Paul Robeson and so forth, and you get some of our other great ancestor heroes and Dr. King and those sort of folks who are thinking more just domestically. We're Americans now. All right, so integration. You can now become. If I turn it this way, it doesn't work. If I turn it this way, you can now become American. Okay. I would wonder what you think American means. What is to be American? What do you think that meant, historically speaking? To be American. Do I hear one?
To be part of America.
To be part of America. Essentially, it meant to be white. I find it fascinating looking at David Walker's appeal, right, written in 1829. I don't know if we're familiar with that, but he's like the Malcolm X of the 19th century. But you'll notice in the way he uses language, interchangeably, he uses white, slave owner, and not to offend, but this is him, and Christian. Right? 1829. He's looking out, he's in Boston, but he's looking out into the world, and at that time, he's not making a distinction really between those three categories of people. He's using those interchangeably. Right, so being American, arguably, you can now come and have the privilege, let's say, of being like us.
Could I interject?
Yes, please.
The idea of Brown v. Board as a Faustian bargain, I'm going to be chewing on that for a while. That sounds like an essay for me to write. Yeah, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And Brown v. Board, you mentioned that it was a combination of 5 different cases. And in the beginning, I was surprised to find this too. Like I said, my education, and the thing that I got most out of school busing and being integrated into white schools was that racism is over, yay, we don't have to worry about this anymore. You said that Brown v. Board was the culmination of several cases, and I think the first one was, I can't tell you what case it was, but was somewhere in the South, and black kids couldn't go to white schools, white kids didn't go to black schools, and the black kids were walking miles and miles and miles past white schools to get to their black school. So black parents, all asked for was a bus for the black students to get to the black school. And that was too damn much. The state put up all its legal resources to avoid having to give these kids a damn bus. That's who we are, people. We talk about we are, Washington, and we identify with Washington and Valley Forge and and all that great stuff. We're a country that put all its resources into avoiding giving black kids a damn bus. And then when school integration started, physically happening in the 70s, that was a long-standing court case here in Buffalo. Buffalo put all its legal resources up against little Miss Nanette Massey going to a school like City Honors. I mean, put all its resources up against it too. That's who we are. That's what we're working against. We really cannot afford to sit back and pat ourselves on the back. Because, I see some of these private schools, they have 2 or 3 black students, and they just, put them up in the front of the pictures and pat themselves on the back. We're good now. We really can't. That's not who we are. That's not the honest truth about who we are. There's a book written by Mark Goldman, who is local here in Buffalo. It's called City by the Lake. And he talks about the history of Buffalo, and he uses the 1976 Nyquist v. Nyquist v. I forget it all the time. It was the Buffalo desegregation case. He uses that sort of as the backdrop of the whole book. And in it, he tells this one story that I'll never forget. There was a neighborhood where the delineation of the neighborhood kind of went this way a little bit, and this whole part was going to this black school. And there were a couple of white students that lived on this part of the neighborhood that was kind of that way. What the Board of Ed did was redistrict that area so that these couple of white kids didn't have to go to this black school. And in 1976, when it was finally decided, Boston was shot to hell. They put black kids on a school bus, took them to white schools, and the buses had to be escorted by police, bricks thrown and all that great stuff. And I didn't realize that's what my mother was watching on the news when she put me on that bus every day. Black people had to have such faith in this experiment and faith in white people to do the right thing. Black parents had to have that faith when they put their 9-year-old children on that bus and sent them to Delaware and Tacoma, or Delavan and Main Street. And I think that needs to be a part of the story too. We need to really talk about the resources that Buffalo and the government and so on put up against what we have here today. Some black people who can just get a damn fair ass education. And that's part of our history, and it's not part of our way back history. It's still part of our present history too. Let's get real with that.
Yes.
We have work to do on ourselves personally, and on our institutions. We really, really, really cannot afford to sit back and go, we elected a black president, we're good now. We really cannot.
And you guys are all young, and the experiences you're sharing is not that long ago.
No, you're right.
And it's just making it all clear now why things are the way they are.
Yes.
And the narrative that we're given is not this.
Right.
The narrative that we're given is that black schools, they don't care about their students, the education was poor, and all of these things, right? But the stories that you're sharing are the experience that you had being young, was you liked school, you liked your teachers were educated, there were all these things, but that's not the narrative we're given. And even now, the narrative about Buffalo Public Schools is like always a negative light, right? And that, I don't know, I wish more people could hear your stories, and this is really impacting, so thank you for being vulnerable. And all the things that you went through, I know you had different experiences, but you on the end, I'm sorry, I forgot your first name. Mario, like thank you for sharing, because the stuff that you went through is really traumatic, right? And that you're still experiencing those feelings as an adult is huge. Like the things that you had to be exposed to as a kid, and to grow up at such a young age to be exposed to those messages and those things being said to you by adults.
Absolutely.
And you telling the story, you can still feel what you went through.
I still drive past. Well, I think it was it Annette, or was it one of you mentioned that you moved around a lot?
That was me.
Okay, I moved around a lot, and I don't want to get off topic, I'm sorry. I moved around quite a bit, so I went from school 23 on East Delavan, where I walked to school. We actually went home for lunch in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm talking kindergarten, first grade, where I was living in the corner of Delavan and Grider. We walked to school, past house of dry cleaners, looking in and watching the little conveyor belt go around. That was a part of like the community. And then there was some farms that was there. There was, different places that we could stop in as kids. And then we moved, and then I was like, I'm not 100% sure. You just mentioned Delavan and Main Street, School 17.
Mm-hmm.
I went there for 1 year.
Did you?
It was, so we had I went there the year that Ronald Reagan ran for president. We were able to vote as kids in there. And I didn't know, so I voted for Ronald Reagan. I didn't know who he was. But I went from there, and we moved again, and I was at school 78. That's where I would have to fence and go to school. And then we moved from there to 43, and it was night and day. It was I can't say there was no community, but it was a different experience having to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You and your sister fighting over one bathroom to get to the bus, because if you missed the bus, your father was going to, knock you out.
Because now he had to give you a ride, be late for work.
Oh, he was not going to give me a ride. But, yeah, it was just a totally different experience.
But you also have to understand, currently now, in the Buffalo Public Schools, as black and brown teachers, we are constructively evicted from and discouraged from the classroom by white counterparts. We don't talk about that story much, and or getting blacklisted because of we advocate for ourselves, we advocate for the black and brown students, and no one really talks about that because it's a form of bullying and constructively evicting us out of the classroom. So you have this other section of what's going on in the Buffalo Public Schools as black and brown educators. Yes, they hire you, but then when you start to advocate for your children or your students feel comfortable and find you as a safe space, then you're blacklisted or you're difficult or you're labeled all of these things, the angry black woman, the angry black man, or you're the one that's targeted to discipline your black students. So it's just another layer that's unfortunately layered on top of your experiences that many teachers, such as myself, do not speak out against.
Yes.
I had a question for you, actually. Did you go to Campus North? And I knew you in 4th grade, 5th grade.
I did go to Campus North.
Yes, yes. Now you'll remember me. I'm Vanetta, but I remember you.
I definitely got to get a hug.
But I do have a question about your experience in the effects of Brown versus BOE, because it has me seeing you think about our experience, because even though Campus North was, integrated, though to me the way we live our lives, the way we experience school, our classroom and stuff in the world was still very segregated. When we heard the radio, we had BOK Waffle, and then we had 14 Rock. Even the way that we were situated in our room, our classroom, there was nothing, I didn't find anything wrong with it. I remember you were very social. So there, you didn't, but we seem to want to be within ourselves. We got along with the white students, but we were you would draw pictures about Black history all the time, I remember that. And so, I just wondered, with your experience, what effects, after effects, would you say you felt in school from Brown versus BOE?
Thank you for that question. Don't forget my hug. So Campus North, and then I went to City Honors too, starting in 7th grade. So I'll combine those experiences. It wasn't rosy at all. I mean, all right, let me say, I'm Marcus Du Bois Watson. Oh, you need me to have the mic? Yeah, so my full name is Marcus Du Bois Watson. So if that gives you a sense of upbringing, consciousness, that probably has something to do with my experiences and what I could take and not take. But I don't know how many of us experienced this, but like people weren't allowed to touch my hair. It's like not everywhere, but some white kids, they wanted to like touch, like, and we were taught like, don't let nobody ever touch your hair. That was a fight, But that kind of thing would happen in schools. I think we got along with everybody of all backgrounds, but at lunch we had ours was the black nerd table. I remember I played football. I used to go from City Honors to Bennett, where I played football over there, and I forgot what I was saying. I remember this about the littler me. Like, I felt like I played football for all my people. When I think about that, it's like, man, that's a lot of weight, Yes. But that's what little me was doing. I know I was doing that, so that was sort of like the integration, right? And there was a sense, even in City Honors, I remember I reported to the principal on one of the desks, and the N-word was written out there. City Honor, whatever, So I went and I reported it, and I said I was hurt. I think I wrote a little something about it. So I had those kinds of experiences. There was some weighty sense. I don't know if it was my own. I don't think it's paranoia given the history of black folks in this country. But I have, a lot of the white folks thought they were better. They thought they were better. It doesn't mean they weren't kind-hearted in some kind of way, but we're all socialized into this country, and it was back then. So I felt that, and I remember playing football. Like I scored a touchdown. I scored a touchdown for my people. So right. I mean, that gave me an added sense of motivation to do well. So I don't know if that starts to answer the question, but the integration part of it. It was manageable, but I think it redoubled my my willingness or my motivation to be with us, to be with my people. That's where I felt comfortable, But at City Honors, this is the last thing I'll say about the other people speak, but I remember I don't really know why I was going there. you know. I wasn't intellectual, like, that came later. I was, like you said, I was very social, you know. And so being a social person, I wasn't finding a lot of outlets for that at City Honors. So I just kind of waiting for school to end. And then I went back, you know, Marlon, Steve, and we did our, you know, hip hop stuff, and that was life for me. That's what made me come alive. So anyway, but I'll let someone else.
So let's have one more question because of time. It's a weekday. I know people, you know, have families and everything. So Desiree will. We'll
I just want to acknowledge that going back to the Board of Brown versus Board of Ed, when I worked with you, Kathy, at Campus West, we experienced asbestos at Buff State. So we had to move to Lovejoy area, Lorraine Academy. And that's where we all, no matter whether you were black or white, experienced racism within race. White versus white. North going to the South Buffalo. The parents protested their kids going to the other side of town. I had never seen white people against white people. The black children was, hey, we're just going to school. But to see that and experience that as a young teacher, it was definitely devastating because they not only protested, they went to the board meetings. They refused to send their kids to school for quite a while because North Buffalo thought they were more prestigious than South Buffalo. With that being said, Donette Ruffin actually had one of the best and first community schools in the city of Buffalo, School 53. And she ran it very well. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and Kathy ran ECC Early Childhood Center after Ophelia Nicholas, and over here with Rosalind Taylor, who was a supervisor in elementary ed. I don't want to exclude them. I know that panel is there, but I want to acknowledge them because they're ancestors. We're standing on the shoulders of you guys who came before us.
All right. So let's we'll close it up with Abigail Henry, and then you all can have some unofficial conversations. But I don't know how long we have.
Close at 8, so they won't be closed at 8, so you'll have to mingle on your way towards the door.
Right. So if you all can kind of help us clean up as we leave, we would definitely appreciate that. And you know, but yeah, it is past our time, so we want to make sure we honor people's time. All right. Yes. Good. No, Mike.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Abigail Henry, and I'm a graduate fellow with the center. We just want to say thank you to Jill, Kathy, Nanette, Donette, Mario, Anthony, and Marcus for giving us all their time, expertise, and most importantly, their stories. As a Black teacher of Black history, I've had the blues a little bit recently, understandably, and you all inspired me. You inspired me so much to keep doing the work, to keep showing up every day, to keep on learning Black history. So thank you so much for really sharing your stories. The success of Brown versus Board of Education is an occasion that deserves celebration as it paved the way for educational equity. However, we are also fortunate to be able to look at it critically as a historical moment, not without nuance. Thank you for shedding light on that nuance, the good, the bad, and the ugly aftermath of Brown. To this day, it is clear that we have still so far to go towards true equity. I've been thinking about just how many schools still need Black teachers. I've been thinking about how many schools, I come from Philly, that need a big ass pool. Like there's so many of them that do, because you know, other kids want to learn how to swim too. That being said, like I really believe community programs like this and just coming together as a community is just so good for the heart. It's good for the soul. Like I'm feeling like in a much better space just because of sharing the time with you all this evening. Our thanks go to the Baldy Center for Law and Social Policy for being our sponsor, and to the Graduate School of Education for helping facilitate this event. Thank you to this YMCA, it's a beautiful YMCA, for partnering with us and acting as our host. And finally, our thanks to you all for attending and engaging with us this evening. Please follow us, connect with us at the center. We have some wonderful events going on. Daphne, who was here earlier, she has a book club in January. She's doing a book club on the Three Mothers, if you know of that book. We would love for you to join us for the book club. And we just look forward to continue doing great work with you, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.